Welcome back, Saints fans. The New Orleans Saints dropping their first one of the season. Oh man, this is it's a tough one to swallow. You expect losses, right? I remember being so big coming into the season. I said, look, if we just start the first 4 games 500, you feel better going in and getting in that kind of the middle of the year, and you feel better, like it's gonna be all right, right? And not the case today. We got Derek Carr injury, got a 17-point lead blown after they are unable to score in the second half, and a missed field goal by the rookie. Not that we can exactly get excited about Will Lutz over there in Denver, because Denver got absolutely, completely wasted by the Miami Dolphins today. For those that missed it, 70-20. Yeah, that was the actual score, by the way, 70-20. If you're curious who the worst defense in the NFL is, it ain't us. It's them. But anyway, we're going to get into today. We're going to go quarter by quarter. But who dat to those who are here in the chat already? Mike, good to see Matt, Troy, Jefferson, Cliff, Canby, Raheem, Gillion, Troy, Jefferson. Again, good to see you. I don't agree the O-line's trash, but they certainly played bad again. Crass, good to see you. Try to Static, Mark 504, Mega Man, Saints Garcia, 985 Live, Randall, James Griffon, Mr. Bim, 47 Stages, everybody else. Who dat to you? Welcome in to the live reaction show. And this is a film room that I'm not really looking forward to this week, but we're going to have to get into some of these negatives. But let me go quarter by quarter. We'll go quarter by quarter, and we will discuss how this game went. I will also make one statement real clearly. This is not a Jameis Winston hate fest, but man, even though Derek Carr has missed opportunities and missed reads, when I talk about the New Orleans Saints offense being better with Derek Carr than it was last year with Dalton and Winston, this is what I'm talking about, man. Second half shutout. But let's go quarter by quarter. O-line struggles early in the run game. That you can see that New Orleans wants to get back to its inside-outside zone running scheme, but weren't able to find that early on. I actually will give credit to Pete Carmichael making that adjustment going into the second half. We're going into more of a toss sweep type of run game to capture that outside. Give him credit on that one. New Orleans was really good facing third downs in the first quarter. They actually were completing 75% of their third downs and were 1 for 1 in the red zone. These notes are going to be very important as we go throughout the game. They started off really, really strong. Carr was 7 for 9 for 52 yards and a TD in that first quarter, and the defense looked to be adjusting pretty well early on without Marcus May and without Paulson Adebo, who was a late miss here with a injury here in practice yesterday. So that was a late little just, oh crap moment, and shout out to Yadam and Isaac Yadam, who came in, and I thought he played an admirable game, but clearly started getting targeted heavy in the second half. Now, in the second quarter, Cesar Ruiz would go out with a concussion. In response to this, the New Orleans Saints would place James Hurst at right guard and then put Anders Pete back at left guard. And I will say that I think that Anders Pete did a pretty decent job at left guard today, having to fill in. So I guess it was good to see that O-line depth being, effective, if you want to use that word. And as you had more of this game go on, again, you had some good adjustments by Pete Carmichael here. Not always great execution. I'm going to really harp on that when we get to the second half, but that was a big adjustment they had to make in the second quarter. Chris Olave also had an absolutely amazing, had 2 incredible catches this game. I wish you could have come out with a win. Here are the notes for the first half. Derek Carr ended up finishing the first half 11 for 16, 96 yards, had taken 2 sacks, and 1 TD, a 105 rating. And you would finally start to see Jones and Miller start to get a little bit more successful in the running game. Again, part of those Pete Carmichael adjustments. Would you like to see Chris Olave was 4 for 5, 51 yards with that long of 27. On the defensive side, the only successful sack that you managed to get was Alontae Taylor. And this was a big issue for the first half. You did not see that front four getting a lot of consistent pressure on Love. And after the second half, Matt LaFleur had adjusted to the blitz packages that New Orleans had prepped for this game. And when that left, you saw less and less pressure. Jordan Love was able to have an easier time dissecting that Saints defense. Final notes. This is huge. New Orleans only had 2 penalties in the first half versus the Packers having 7. I make this an important note because as you're about to see, it completely flips in the second half. Third quarter notes, real quick. Offense struggling with third down conversions and the loss of Derek Carr. Leaving the third quarter, you had gone from 75% completing your third downs to by the third quarter, you were down to 40%. New Orleans leaving the third quarter was 4 for 10 on third down. They started to struggle, unable to complete that, and there were a few reasons for it. One, you had the ineffective ability of the Taysom Hill side of the run game, but more importantly, penalties started to kick in, especially on the offensive side of the ball here in the second half. Beyond just that aspect, though, the Green Bay O-line had definitely adapted to the blitz packages. That mattered, and I am personally upset that the left side of the Packers offensive line was able to have as successful of a day as it did because they were missing both their starters. Both David Bakhtiari and Eldon were gone on that left side. You would have hoped that guys like Nate Shepard, Brian Brzee, and Carl Granderson could have taken advantage of that. Simply wasn't the case, and they were running their twist stunt game. You did have some good one-on-one opportunities. They simply weren't able to capitalize and create any level of consistent pressure. And then the fourth quarter, well, y'all all were there as it happened. Y'all remember as it happened. If you go drive by drive, possession by possession, New Orleans started off better. First 4 possessions, 2 punts, but a touchdown and a field goal. And then you get to their last 6 possessions, 5 punts, and a missed field goal in the very end of the game. And I think a big one for me is you had an interception that ended up resulting in a punt and not resulting in points. And that ends up being critical. Again, offense is going to be the big ones that we really kind of harp in on then with this game. It really felt like they provided little, especially in the second half. And it's not even an opinion. That's just a fact. Let's talk about overall stats. Kendra Miller ends up with 9 attempts, 34 yards in his first attempt or first time as a starting running back here. Jones backs up with 8 for 31. Again, that is an improvement considering the first half they were around 2.5 yards per carry. Them getting better, but you saw the New Orleans Saints kind of abandon that in the fourth quarter. And we talk about some of the negatives and positives of Pete Carmichael real quick. I've given Pete Carmichael a lot of credit for adjusting as games have gone on. And he's done really well with Derek Carr. And then Jameis Winston came in, and you saw, in my opinion, again, this is a quick react. I haven't even gotten to see the All-22. That won't drop until tonight. But quick reaction, my thoughts were when Jameis Winston went back in at quarterback, you saw Pete Carmichael revert to his old self. He went back to what he feels like is safe, and he went back to some of his old bad strategies. For example, we had way too many 3-and-outs with passing with Jameis Winston in a quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that Winston did terrible or even that he did well, secretly did well. I think, Winston missed some really egregiously bad passes. But I will say that there was a stark difference in play calling between what you had with Derek Carr and what you had with Jameis Winston. And your normal reaction would be to be like, well, of course, that was the backup quarterback. But that shouldn't be as prevalent here, where you're talking about Jameis Winston being your former starter. Why did you go back into those type of situations? And again, these are questions that I think Pete Carmichael has got to answer and look in the mirror for himself. Because even though I think that the Saints defense did start to struggle in the fourth quarter, I think there's reasons for that. And context is something that we talk about a lot on this channel, right? And I see a lot of y'all in the chat. Don't worry, we'll get to chats here in just a second. But when you look at what happened here, man, I think that even with the defense kind of missing opportunities, the defense definitely missed opportunities to take advantage of that left side of the offensive line of Green Bay. The defense definitely started seeing way more snaps than they were accustomed to, thus Love and McFlurry over there having an opportunity to whip it up and have the ice cream machine working. So even though all that happened, the New Orleans Saints defense still held one of the top offenses in the NFL to 18 points. 18 points. Even with the defense having its worst game of the season and falling down the line, the New Orleans Saints defense still held them under 20 points. And if you're a NFL football team in 2023, you have to win those games because that is what elite defenses do. Now, the last 4 Green Bay drives, they're on your screen. They had field goal, touchdown, in game. I get it. You shouldn't let them score in their final drives, but it should be noted that the New Orleans Saints defense did extremely well up until that point. And note the field positions too, because look at these drives, right? New Orleans gives up a field goal, but they only had to go 46 yards. New Orleans gives up a touchdown, but only needed to go 13 yards. Now, we'll say that this is the drive that New Orleans defense gave 67 yards up to penalty. And then that final last drive, the important one, they gave up 80 yards and the touchdown. So I agree. Defense slowly started to get worse, but it has to come down to the offense, right? Now, we'll give credit to Jameis Winston for executing a good drive to get into an opportunity for the field goal to happen. But I do want to say something real quick. I don't think that Jameis Winston looked great, but he just had to come in and spot start. You don't really judge a backup quarterback, no matter who it is, harshly from that. I don't feel like Winston did a bad job. I feel like Winston missed a couple of throws, but Winston's just going to miss a couple of throws. He's a backup quarterback. But the biggest issue I actually have, and Jonathan Vilma actually pushed this out in the broadcast as well, you have studs at wide receiver. You have high expectations for your best tight end. Yet the people who probably struggled the most in that final drive were Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and Juwan Johnson, particularly with their route running and spacing. The spacing being the key there. You had multiple times them overlapping each other. In fact, in back-to-back plays where Winston's trying to get a pass off. Again, this isn't me saying that if everything was perfect, Jameis Winston is suddenly the best quarterback in the NFL. But I am saying that you don't expect guys like Michael Thomas and Chris Olave to be running on top of each other a yard away in a route. That's not the design. It shouldn't be the design. And somehow, the New Orleans Saints literally ran into themselves, and that took away what ability you would have had for a guy like Jameis Winston to try to move the ball effectively. Now, they still drove it and had an opportunity for a 46-yard field goal, and they should have capitalized on that, or 44-yard field goal. Blake Grupe misses it, right? Green Bay would have had a minute left on the clock with one timeout to try to match with a field goal win of their own. But at the end of the day, I still can't leave the fact that you had that offense where your biggest playmakers simply ran into. I mean, they're in their own path. These are the guys who are veterans. They're not new. I mean, you can have an expectation of, okay, well, Derek Carr missed a TD pass to Michael Thomas. Maybe that time fixes that. But you really can't say much when your stars of Chris Olave and Michael Thomas are running their routes in a poor way. So definitely going to be pulling out the tape and seeing what caused all of that. But we're going to grab y'all's thoughts here. Obviously, the New Orleans Saints lose, and I expect people to be ruffled, feathered, pretty bit upset, and that makes complete sense, right? I think that that's completely okay. So let's go into it. Mr. Johnson says the team doesn't believe in Winston. You can see the energy leave the team when Carr went down. I'm not going to speak to the whole not believing in Winston part, but I will say this. You definitely noticed a momentum shift when Derek Carr went down. Now, we still don't have a full update as of the time of me recording this live recap of what Derek Carr is going through, or if he is injured, or what the results are. It says being examined for a shoulder injury, and that's all they've said. Being examined. There is no update there. If you've lost Derek Carr, I do think that makes this season significantly more difficult to go through. But I will also be very clear. Nothing has been said that says that Derek Carr is out for the year or will even miss a game. Getting x-rays done, simply better to believe positive than negative. Abraham says, outside of that last drive, it looked exactly like last year with Jameis. And I agree with you, Abraham. And this goes back to my Pete Carmichael thing, because the first two games, Pete Carmichael was a better version of Pete Carmichael. The first half of the Green Bay game, Pete Carmichael was doing good with adjustments. And then a big wrench got thrown into his engine with the Derek Carr injury. And then he started to become a Pete Carmichael that you saw last year, being very cautious, very safe, and not as aggressive, and certainly not the same level of plays that you saw in the first couple of games. So I'm giving Pete Carmichael credit this year because he deserved it. But I think Pete Carmichael also owns a large portion of today's failure. Carmichael did a great job of play calling early on. Pete Carmichael did a great job with the first two wins, trying to take advantage of a team that's growing. But when you have your backup quarterback come in, your game plan can't change. The whole purpose has to be of having a backup quarterback you can believe in, who can execute your game plan to finish out that day. And it's very clear they weren't trying that anymore. Now, that doesn't mean all bad happened. I thought it was great that you saw Michael Thomas get a few more opportunities. But I think that was honestly more of a style of Winston than it was a play calling thing. I just think that Winston prefers to try to get to what he believes is his number one route in terms of the guy that he's used to for short intermediate yards, and he goes after Thomas, who had 6 receptions for 50 yards, which is a solid day, especially a lot of underneath stuff. And then Chris Olave had another 100-yard game, and he did miss a pass in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. It did hit him in the chest. To be very clear, y'all. I talked about Derek Carr going after Chris Olave when he had a wide open Michael Thomas, and he did that. And I think they should have gone for Michael Thomas. But on that play, he hits Chris Olave in the chest at the bottom pylon. Chris Olave just doesn't bring it in, and he doesn't have his feet inbounds. But it hits him square in the chest. So there are still a couple of opportunities where Chris Olave needs to reel it in. The biggest thing for me was, whose fault was it that Juwan Johnson, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas are running on top of each other in that final drive? And I don't think that's on Pete Carmichael, and I don't think it's on Jameis Winston. That's got to be on the receiver room, and we need to figure out why that was happening. Brock says we literally have no offense. Certainly had no offense in the second half of this game. Certainly not. So we'll keep waiting. Kamara can't do anything with bad run blocking. I think that you did see some of that improve, Arnold, and I think that with AK, you also have a higher level of talent there to take advantage of smaller holes. You've got a rookie here who's trying to work his way in. I don't think Kendra Miller had a bad game, but I do think that we will look at that all 22. If there's specific plays that you want to see, remember, we will try to have 3 Saints film rooms out this week. We'll cover the good, the bad, the ugly. And if we need to take a look at that run game, we can certainly do that if that's the type of film study y'all would like to see. Just let me know on Discord, YouTube, and over on Twitter. Godfather, good to see you. Godfather only comes in on the losses because he likes to brag. O-line issues and stale play calling, predictable, will make 85 Bears defense look weak. My only point against that is it was perfectly fine in terms of play calling up until Jameis Winston, and that's a big concern. That is a really, really big concern. If Jameis Winston comes in this offense and completely ruins your game plan, you're not able to address the situation, not able to rise up to the challenge, that's definitely an issue with you as a coach. You have got to have everybody ready, and that includes Winston. And if Winston comes in, your play call sheet should not minimize. He should have been ready. It's not like Winston is the rookie Jake Hayner. Should have been ready. Mr. O says the O-line is having issues, and the NFL knows it. We're struggling to run and pass protect. Now, Carr could be out for a while. We'll certainly have to wait and see. New Orleans did end up giving 4 sacks again. That is now 4 sacks in every game. At least 4 sacks in every game that they have given up, and you're not going to win a lot of football games doing that. I still want to see the Saints defense step up because only 1 sack, and that being from a blitzing nickel corner, that won't cut it either. And if you can't trust the Saints offense, well, damn it, you need the defense to go and be the elite guys that they're supposed to be. Takada says, as soon as Winston came in, we stopped running and we slashed a 17-point lead. Yeah, I'm going to kick it in. Check out the playlist. I'll put it on your screen, everybody. You can start looking at mid-third quarter, fourth quarter, where New Orleans has the ball, and it's Jameis Winston pass short. Then you did run 1 play with Tony Jones. Then you go back to incomplete passes. Then you go incomplete pass. There's a delay of game penalty, and then we're punting. You'll come after the next drive in the fourth quarter. You have Jones go for 1 yard, and you just leave it. No more. We start passing all fourth quarter, and it's not all bad. Like I said, you wasn't all run. You did have a couple of opportunities. You tried to run Rashid Shaheed on that sweep, but I think at that point, you kind of been figured out. You've got to stick to some of that aggressive mid-downfield that you were going for before, and they kind of got away from that. I think that was a problem. Aaron says, done watching till Carr's back. If I needed this kind of play, I could turn on last year's highlights. Same Winston, same Pete, same O-line, same heartbreak. Yeah, I agree with you, man. And again, this is definitely on Pete Carmichael for that second half. You've got to adjust, and you better find a way. Curious to see what's going to happen. So it says, why not Taysom or continue to run when in field goal position? I agree with you, Solo. I'm actually right there with you. And you look on that last drive for the Saints, obviously you have that Chris Olave that you go to. Then you have the 2-minute warning. You ran Taysom Hill 1 time, didn't really get anywhere. Then you went incomplete, 2-yarder to Michael Thomas, and then you end up having to go for the field goal. So you had opportunities here. I will say that you didn't have an opportunity for Taysom in the run game as much, but I think if you looked at how Green Bay was playing, why didn't you get an opportunity for like Michael Thomas crossing pattern or a Y-leak situation with Taysom Hill, and then using Taysom Hill as the quarterback and throwing that pass? You didn't see that. Again, this is my big complaint from this game with the offense. Pete Carmichael, I think, he called a good game in the first half. As soon as Carr went down, Pete Carmichael lost all the marbles that he had. Pete Carmichael lost every marble and just called a bad game. The ingenuity was gone. The predictability was there, and the situational football returned to being predictable, where first down pass, second down run, and third and longs, he's going for long shots. He became very predictable. And you want to see a better utilization of your playmakers and your stars, and you just didn't get that this game. And I think that there's a lot of questions that we need to have answered moving into week 3. But week 3 is going to be big, right? You've got tomorrow night, you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing the Philadelphia Eagles. If Tampa loses, every team in the NFC South will be at least 2-1. So even if they won, they're only a game ahead. New Orleans has an opportunity to win. And I said it very clearly before the season started. I wanted to go at least 2-2 to start the season. That's where I had a little bit of comfortability in this team because I wanted them to be hot in the second half. I wanted the offense to gel in the second half. You got 2 road games. You won 1 road game. You've now lost the other. You're going back home. And then after that, you got New England and Houston. And then you're going to start a slew of like the next 6 games you have. 4 of them are at home. So you've got to find a way to at least get through these next couple games and then wait and see what happens with Derek Carr. We'll see if the results come through. Nobody has said anything at the time of me making the podcast now. But again, we will fill you in as we get to Tuesday's episode. But yeah, here's what Ian said an hour ago. Take you to a local hospital, run additional tests after having x-rays at the stadium, and they will check for, among other things, internal injuries. So if the x-ray didn't say anything, then that probably covers a lot of bone, and I'm not a doctor, some ligament issues, but if they go and get, say, an MRI, they want a clear picture of something, maybe to confirm what an x-ray could have shown. I'm real curious to see what that ends up being, because obviously Dennis Allen didn't reveal anything, just said that he's being examined. But if you got taken to a hospital for a deeper look, probably trying to get an MRI, maybe they didn't have one in Green Bay, or for whatever the reason, they got the x-ray done, which every team has that x-ray ready at the stadium. Maybe they want a closer look at something, and it is a shoulder they're looking at, and more importantly, it's his throwing shoulder. His right shoulder is the one that they are taking an eye out. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Can the Saints get rid of Penning? My question, T-Rex, would be why. This is actually Penning's best game of the year. Granted, we're looking at the broadcast view. We'll verify or change our minds after the All-22, but I actually saw a lot of good reps from Penning, and I even saw him utilizing some technique here in week 3 that we didn't see in week 1 and 2. And if y'all choose and we do a film study on him, I can show that he could be doing a little bit better, right? Small, right? Little bit better. Little bit better. We'll see if it gets any better past that. But as of right now, I would say that there was some improvement. I would say that as far as if you need to take a positive from what has been a pretty bad situation, that is one. That Penning played a better game today. Most of the issues are on the opposite side, not on the left side today. So we shall continue to wait and see. We wasted draft picks on O-linemen who weren't scouted as solid. That's either a knock on GM or on coaching. Well, I think the only one you wasted one on in that case would be Trevor Penning, but he wasn't the problem in this game. So I don't think that that's the issue. I think we're back to the old issues of last year, which is play calling with Pete Carmichael in that second half, and then the offense simply not executing. I don't really think that it's an issue with, the offensive line here in terms of Trevor Penning, a new draft pick, and certainly not Cesar Ruiz, who got a concussion. This is on Ryan Ramczyk taking a step back and, asking questions. Okay, well, why is Landon Young going one-on-one against the best pass rusher they have? Those are the questions that I'm kind of curious on, and I don't think it's an issue with early draft picks. I think this is an issue with decision-making. This is an issue with why are we doing some of these things, and I've been very clear on how Trevor Penning has played through 2 weeks. I'm certainly not hyping him up if you watch the film studies, but I don't think this one is one where we can really nail on Trevor Penning. I think we've got to talk about the grander issue here. So that's just kind of where I sit on it at the moment. But I think Penning looked good this game in terms of how he's compared to his first 2 games. Does he look like a stud left tackle? No. I mean, I'm not out here arguing for that. And again, if we watch the All-22 and that is not what it shows because we're basing this off watching the game live, that's completely okay. But I think this is definitely not one where we're talking about him giving up all that pressure on the left side. So, yeah, we'll see. What do you think about this O-line coach? Should he be fired? I mean, should he be fired? I don't know if I'd say fired. I'm talking about Doug Marrone here. I think New Orleans has had some great offensive line coaches recently. I think They had to go with Marone because other guys have gotten moved or poached, etc. And I don't think you're seeing a great offensive line performance right now. Do I think some of it's coaching? Yeah, I do. I do think some of it's coaching, but I also think some of it is we have players not playing at the level you're used to seeing. For example, Aaron McCoy, fantastic in week 1. Aaron McCoy immediately getting beat in week 2, right? Or I'm sorry, week 3. He's fantastic in week 2. I meant last week. You got Ryan Ramczyk, who's a guy that's been a 3-time All-Pro. Ryan Ramczyk is not playing like a 3-time All-Pro because even though Evans beat Landon Young, Ramczyk was also losing to the same guy. So we're talking about your best offensive lineman, at least who's been historically your best in recent years, struggling today. And that is going to take away a lot of the routes you want to run, like the Rashid Shaheed deep routes that you love to run. Those, even with Shaheed's speed, take 3 seconds to develop, throw, etc. And you're going to struggle to get that in these situations. So again, one of the positives from today, if you want to take positives, is Detroit beat Atlanta 20-6, right? So Atlanta loses. They're now 2-1. And right now Seattle is playing the Carolina Panthers, and Seattle is currently winning that game, though it's a long way to go. But even if Carolina wins, they're 1-2. So this did not end up hurting you as much in the division. You do hate to lose to an NFC opponent, but you still played a tough, close game. You lost 18-17. You lost by 1 point. And there are definitely things that we should all hone in on, but it's definitely not the same as what happened to Denver. And I actually feel really bad for Denver right now. Denver lost 70-20. And I don't even think Russell Wilson's playing bad from what I've watched him this year, but they are going for historically bad defense levels right now, y'all. The Miami Dolphins put up 70. So that also puts a little bit of perspective in all this for me. The Miami Dolphins had 726 yards of total offense. And then you look at what the Saints defense did, having a bad day, gave up 18 points. So here you go. You're the Saints. You're still 2-1, but you don't know what happened to your star quarterback. He's getting, results taken. We'll see if we get an update before the end of the show, but probably not. We'll probably have to wait until Tuesday. But really, really rough spot to be in, man. Really rough spot to be in. Let's see. The ones to be concerned about, if you're curious, just this one of the medical doctors here for football who does a lot. Clavicle fracture, an AC or an SC dislocation, shoulder dislocation, and a punctured rib as a potential. Those are the things that they postulate and conjecture on what he could be going in and getting checked out. So we go up 18 from 0 to 17-point lead. That, to me, is worse than getting whipped out the gate. To me, Brock, it's absolutely not. I would much rather lose a close game in the final seconds after losing my star quarterback than get beat 70-20. That's just me. Now, if you feel the opposite, that's completely fine. Every fan is allowed to have their take and their opinion. I will never judge y'all for it. But give me an 18-17 loss any day of the week versus going and dropping or giving up 70. Absolutely not. I would much rather have a close game that we lose than a blowout game, because here's the difference, man. If you lose a close game, you can still be a good team. If you give up 70 points in a single game, you're probably not a good football team, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not trying to be mean to Sean Payton here, but you're 0-3 and you just gave up 70 points. Something tells me you're not very good. Give me a close game. I'm not happy that the Saints lost 18-17. There are problems here. Should have won, sure. But give me this game over 70-20 every single week. I don't know how you maintain a locker room when you give up 70 points. I don't know how you can go on the field that next week and say, hey, wipe it off, forget about it. How the hell do you forget about giving up 70 points? So, yeah, this could end up being a game changer for New Orleans. If Derek Carr's out for the year, for example, I no longer think this team wins more games than it loses. I don't think they're a playoff team. But you're 2-1 right now. It's way too far off to worry about any of that. Let's see how it goes. We'll hit it on Monday and keep moving. But, yeah, I would much rather be the team that loses 18-17 the team that loses 70-20. Debo says, another day of me realizing I took Brees for granted. I think this is obviously the biggest thing so many Saints fans are going to struggle with who grew up in this Drew Brees era, and I guess I'm in that. Maybe I have a slight advantage because I've done the quarterback evaluation process. I've done the training. I've seen it. And when I look at Derek Carr, my expectation is never anything Drew Brees like. I mean, my expectation is top 15, maybe top 10 quarterback on a good day, which is how he's paid. But I don't look at him and think amazing. And maybe that's why I don't get as upset. But I'll tell you what, man, it is such a difference to go from a quarterback like a Drew Brees to a Winston, Carr, and even all the way down to an Andy Dalton. And you have a better quarterback in Derek Carr, but even then you're sitting there going, oh my God, there's so many plays that Drew Brees would have nailed. And we'll see how that ends up rolling out. What are your thoughts on those defensive PIs? Because I believe the defender, no ability to avoid them. The one that was probably the worst to hit New Orleans, but also the one that's the most unavoidable, is when the quarterback underthrows the ball and you're in trail with that receiver and you end up running into him and he can't work his way back. That's a completely unavoidable DPI. And that's one of the ones that got called on the Saints. You know, those are terrible. I mean, it costs you 40 yards, but you really can't do anything about that. Now, that doesn't mean quarterbacks are out here underthrowing balls intentionally trying to make that happen, but it's certainly a killer penalty and honestly one that you can't really avoid either. So if Winston doesn't start for 5+ games, how do you personally feel? If Winston starts for 5 games, then I think the best hope is to go 2-3 in those games. So you're 2-1 now. That would mean that you would be 4-5. So that's not a terrible position to be in, but if you're 4-5 with the rest of the Saints schedule, 4-5, that's 9 games in. That means that you still got to play Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, Carolina, New York, Rams, Bucks, and Atlanta. If you are 4-5, there's still a good chance for those last 8 games. But I'm not confident. I'm not confident. So, even one thinks we're in a worse shape with Winston than Carr, you're not very bright. Oh, we are definitely in a worse shape with Winston than with Carr, Joseph. I guess I'm not very bright, but as someone trained to evaluate quarterbacks and talent, I'm going to tell you, you're in a worse position. Are you in like a drastically worse position? I mean, you're not going from Drew Brees to Derek Carr, but you are definitely taking a drop-off. Definitely taking a drop-off. So, if that's the case, the D will suffer for the amount of time they'll be on the field. That is definitely a worry that you have to, be concerned with. That's definitely a worry that you have to be concerned with. As far as when the New Orleans Saints bye is, our bye is week 12 this week. Let's see. Saints bye. Let's see. Which week is it? Week 11. Week 11 is the bye week this year for New Orleans. Week 11. So, King says you guys are spoiled with Breeze. I could never figure out how the Chargers let him go, and now I can't figure out how Raiders let Carr go. We'll wait and see. Debo says the schedule is a cakewalk. Remember, I don't buy into schedules or cakewalks. The most useless stat that comes out every season are preseason roster ranks and preseason predictions on who's going to have the hardest strength of schedule. So that's going to be the toughest one. That's going to be the toughest one. So Winston's definitely drop off from Carr. It's not a big one, but it's a drop off. Yeah, I think it's the concept of drop off, right? Like the drop off from Derek Carr to Jameis Winston is going like a mid-tier top 15 quarterback to a top 35, top 30 quarterback, which is a drop off. But the depth of that drop off may be this, whereas the drop off from a top quarterback in the Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees era to Derek Carr is much wider. But it's still a drop off to go from Carr to Winston. So you need better from Pete Carmichael, and you definitely didn't get that in the second half. So definitely didn't get that in the second half. Let's go a couple more of y'all's comments. We will have a show Tuesday, obviously, and we will have our film study dropping in the morning. My goal is, as long as the All-22 comes out tonight, we'll figure out what we're going to make it about. Eugene says, I should have known the other shoe was about to drop when we were up 17-0 at Lambeau and route to 3-0 with a friendly schedule. Been in this since 81. Pain is our destiny. It's all about perspective, Eugene, because a lot of Saints fans I know now didn't grow up with that, so they don't associate it with it, but almost all the older Saints fans do. I definitely recognize him. Definitely recognize him. So we'll keep moving. Don, Win has Carr done something special, not lose games. He makes fewer mistakes than Winston. That's true. Derek Carr is not a guy that I trust to lead your team to the Super Bowl single-handedly, but he's also a quarterback who doesn't make many mistakes and gets a lot of first downs. That's something that he does pretty well. You know, the term that everybody loves to use that I hate, but we'll just throw it out there because people are familiar with it, is game manager. That is a pretty normal thing. You know, those type of quarterbacks, whether it's a West Coast offense or Earhart Perkins play calling system, air raid, doesn't matter. I mean, some guys are going to, tentative's not the right word, but they're going to take less risk unless those risks are designed. And then you have guys like Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's willing to take a risk whether the play shot is designed for a risk or not. And those are just different styles of quarterbacking. Drew Brees was actually one of those guys, but Drew Brees was an elite level guy. So he might have been that level of aggressive, more of a gunslinger, but he also had the ability to pull it off more times than he didn't. So that's kind of what you get with Carr. It's a more effective, more efficient bet, though it's not going to be a star-studded guy. He's not going to have the same pizzazz as a Mahomes or, the Breeze that you were used to. That's just not who he's going to be. So Joe says, what mistakes did Winston made? Well, keep in mind that it's hard to judge any backup quarterback coming in, but just in the first 2 drives, Winston missed multiple reads. And in fact, he had one sideline read on a scramble drill that he completely threw and he missed by about 10 yards. And again, this is just part of who Winston is. Winston's going to make some great plays. Shout out to that 22-yard pass he made to Michael Thomas over the middle of the field. That was a great read and a great throw. But Winston also makes quite a bit of mistakes too. So it's always that balance. Again, it goes back to what we just said, right? The drop-off from Carr to Winston exists, but it's not the same level of drop-off as from what you were going from, which is a Hall of Fame quarterback, to the quarterbacks you're working with now. So that's a greater drop-off, but you still have a lot of misses by Winston. I honestly don't think he had a bad game, Winston, that is. I think the biggest issue is why were the receivers running on top of each other, and why was Pete Carmichael going from aggressive, making a play, to falling off, right? That's kind of more my concern. I think Winston did admirable for coming in and playing a quarter and a half. I don't necessarily blame anything on Winston, though he did miss some throws. The real big deal is Pete Carmichael and the offense not scoring. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter. You don't look at your backup quarterback and say, he's the reason we lost the game. Sure, he can miss some throws, but it comes back to why did Pete Carmichael change a lot of what he was doing, and why did they stop utilizing what was working? Why did they become what we had now? Is 2021 Winston worse than Carr? Yes. I mean, I'll say this, Joseph. I was one of the, and I mean, still am, biggest supporters for Winston when he was a starter. I did tons of film study and showed what he could do well. But you can go back 10 years ago when we first started this podcast, and people asked me, who in the league would you rather have to come fill in for Drew Brees? Who's the best fit for this offense? And Derek Carr has been that guy for 10 years for me. So, yeah, I would definitely take Carr in this offense in New Orleans over Winston for any year period going back the past 10 years. And if other people have a different opinion, that's also completely okay, right? I think that's completely good. I've said before that I think that having Winston as your backup is the best position you can be in terms of having a backup quarterback. But you certainly wanted Carr to be your starter. Certainly want Carr to be your starter. Winston should have played better. He was playing for his next paycheck, and if he did good, maybe the Jets will have a look at him. Again, I don't think that Winston played bad. I mean, the man was 10 for 16 for 101 yards. Did he play bad? No. Did he miss some throws? Absolutely, which is why he was completing 62% of his passes to Carr's 72%. And that's kind of what Winston's always been. Winston's always been that lower end in terms of completion percentage guy, but he'll make a lot of big throws. I'm not blaming any of today on Winston. Did he miss some throws? Sure. He's the backup quarterback. You are in a hell of a lot worse point besides the backup quarterback when you blow an 18-point lead. That's not on Winston. That's on a lot of other things. So, Max says Carmichael just doesn't trust Jameis, and the play calling is noticeably different. At the end of the day, Mac, if Carr is hurt and injured in a significant way, Pete Carmichael has to get over it. Pete Carmichael has got to get over, because if you have to start Winston, then you better trust the guy. You better trust the guy. So, it's not an excuse anymore, right? Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. But at this point, no. No, that's I want to say ridiculous. You man up and you make it work. You man up and you make it work. So, if we see Winston starting next week, would it be the first time he's had Thomas and Kamara? I mean, I would say that you're getting the best version of Michael Thomas now and Kamara than Winston's ever had. Yes. So, yes. And just to echo what Mr. Don says, to be very clear, this is not a me rooting for Andy Dalton last year thing either, because I think if you had to pick between the 3 quarterbacks, I'm picking Derek Carr, and who's the one that I want least leading the team today? Andy Dalton. So, Can we trade for Kyle Shanahan? Technically, trading for coaches is a real thing, but I doubt that you can trade for him as head coach and move him down to OC. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Max says Winston ain't to blame. The coaching is to blame. O-line playing poorly, play calling trash, defense ended up being too soft. And I agree. Now, next week, if Carr does end up missing, and I know Nick said about an hour ago that he expected Carr to miss time with this. And to me, if you're going to verify something at the hospital that day, usually that means something, you probably noticed something that you want to get confirmed. We'll see what it is. But I'll say this, man. You got to get to at least 500 through the first 4 games. And you really need to be at least 500 through your first 8 games. And then you get hot in the second half. And we'll see what ends up happening. But the offensive line problems, doesn't matter who's at quarterback. You got to fix the O-line. And I'm actually more concerned now than I was in week 1. And the reason is I knew Trevor Penning was going to have hiccups. I knew Trevor Penning was going to have problems. I didn't expect Ryan Ramczyk to have that. I'm more concerned now than I was then. I'm more concerned now. But we will get more information over the next 48 hours and hopefully have an answer for all of y'all. But I am more concerned now based on that. What's up with Ryan Ramczyk? Why did he struggle so much? We've got to get it going. And I do agree with you, Joseph. If the Saints hadn't gone full conservative mode on offense, they still would have won this game. But I do have to say it, Blake Groupie, you got to make a 46-yard kick. That's literally why Will Lutz was let go. He wasn't hitting consistently like he used to. Game-winning situation. You have to make this kick. He missed it. So I don't think it's disingenuous at all to blame Pete Carmichael for his problems. Not bad to blame Ryan Ramczyk. Not bad to say that Brian Breezy and Nate Shepard and Carl Granderson should have taken advantage of that left side of that injured Packers O-line. Blake Groupie, you got to make your damn field goals. He is now 6 for 7 on the season. And the one he missed, game winner. Got to make it. Simple as that. And if you're going to give blame out, you better give blame out accurately to everybody around the team. So I hope you guys enjoyed the channel. Thank you for always hanging out, and thank y'all for all the support. I'm going to wrap it up. We're going to see some film study tonight. Hopefully I'll have one out tomorrow sometime. Depends on when it drops for me. I appreciate all y'all supporting the channel. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't already so you can keep updated. And I need to know, who do y'all want to see? Who do y'all want to see? Film study in the Saints film room this week. We're going to at least 2. We're going to try for 3. Y'all let me know. Join the Discord. Hit me up on Twitter. Who dat? God bless. Appreciate every single one of you. And if you want to support the channel, make sure you check out my website, revdeuce.com. You can sign up to support us monthly to help support more film studies, more podcasts, etc. Who dat? God bless. Catch you on the next one.